So how many of you think that you're absolutely perfect? I know. I know, but I do run into those HR professionals that, or individuals in that HR function who actually try to convince me that because they've been doing it for 20 or 25 years, it's got to be right. It absolutely has to be, well, this is the way I've always done it. And I had an organization, a brand new CEO, in fact, who had just moved here to the Cincinnati market, and he has multiple locations across the country. And he said, I know that I need somebody to come in and just give us an idea of what we're doing well and maybe things that we could be improving on. But he said, I've got an HR person who's been here since the doors opened. And I don't think it's going to be an easy job to convince her that we need to have an outside pair of eyes looking in. And I had to chuckle because I thought, oh, if you only knew, you are in such great company. And so that kind of stirred a little bit of thought. This show is going to be more for me to help you rather than motivated by anyone in particular. You see, I actually started thinking, what mistakes are HR folks doing that maybe we're not acknowledging? How, I told somebody the other day, he called and he said, I just don't understand. I mean, don't they understand what they're doing? And it just slipped out. And I said, well, some people just can't get out of their own way. And, if you really think about it, isn't that true? So what I actually did was I went out and did a little research on what mistakes are being made in HR. And has anyone really looked at this? And believe it or not, I actually found a couple articles that I thought were rather intriguing. So I thought we'd go through those lists because I want you to think really hard. I want you to do a self-analysis right now. I want you to listen to some of these lists and then challenge yourself. You don't have to tell anybody, but challenge yourself. How can you be better, more efficient, more productive? How can you alter what you're doing to feel better about what you're doing in your job? So I found an article in Forbes, and it's a bit antiquated, I will say, but I thought, it had enough substance that I would include it today. And they have 10 things that they feel, the top 10 things that HR people do wrong, or where the mistakes are. And their number one is turning a blind eye to employee-related issues. Now think about that. How many, and remember, let me preface this real quick. Remember, 90%, if not more, of the HR decisions in your company are being done by your supervisors. They're being done by the boots on the ground. You're, in some cases, based on the size of your company and how many locations you have, you may be more reactive than proactive. So how many of your supervisors are actually turning a blind eye to a complaint of bullying, or a complaint of, I just don't feel safe here, or I don't understand why I didn't get that raise? Number two, for them, relying solely on the interview for hiring. Now, I thought that was rather interesting. How many of you are just doing an interview and no references? You're not checking the social media. You're not doing a background check. I understand those of you who don't want to do a drug test. I get that. But are you doing anything else in addition to just that interview? And when we think about remote workers, individuals that we may never meet, would it not be prudent to go ahead and do something a little bit more than just that interview? And I'm talking, I don't care if you've got 4 people doing the verbal interview. Wouldn't you like to have a little bit more of the back message on that individual? Think about it. Number 3 for them is an unstructured salary increase plan. And I literally have seen the deterioration of the rhyme or reason for increases and rate changes over the past 20, 25 years. I mean, it's just, it used to be so structured. We used to have pay grades and job grades and pay ranges and all this huge structure. And then everybody just kind of laxed off and started shooting from the hip. But think about how damaging that can be if we're not justifying it. Think about what that does to the morale of your team if nobody really understands why someone's getting an increase or why they haven't gotten an increase for 3 or 4 years. And we know that that's happened in many situations. And right now in May of 2025, we're not real certain in some industries where business is going to be for the rest of the year. Do we think that we maybe should have an idea of what we have in terms of pay structures and how we're going to keep our employees? How about subpar management training? I love this one. I love this one because if you've been listening and following the podcast, you know that I am a stickler for training. And if we already know that 90% of the HR decisions are actually being done by the boots on the ground, why aren't we properly training them? Number 5 for them is punishment-based disciplinary actions. And I get that to an extent, but on the other point, are you using any kind of disciplinary action? Start with the conversations, find out the root of the problem, find out if discipline's even necessary. But what about rewards? Are we giving rewards out as well? Number 6, making bad hires. Well, that one will probably always be on the list because remember, we only can do so much in the interviewing process. But again, if we're really not spending the time, if we really don't know what we're hiring for, if we aren't acknowledging the needs of the business to match with the competencies and skill sets of the candidates, anyone can be a bad hire. Number 7, not having a clearly defined onboarding process. And I have seen a number of training programs over the years trying to address and help teams improve their onboarding process. But you have to take it seriously. If you're not concerned about the first impression you make on candidates, you're probably slipping on a few other things as well. Number 8 for them is a reactive rather than proactive approach to problems. And isn't that what I just started out with? Many of you are so overwhelmed, or you're just at a point where you're just trying to put out the closest fire. So all you can do is react. But to be the best and the most productive and the most strategic person that you can possibly be, which is truly the biggest benefit you can be for the company, we have to find ways, not just some, we have to find ways to get you more proactive so problems and fires don't get started. Number 9, poor data management. And again, I know some companies who aren't even using sophisticated payroll programs. So they really don't know how many hours, or they don't know, they don't have the information quickly at hand on when they gave increases or if they paid holidays. It's still on paper and pencil. And then their number 10 is not embracing HR's role as a true business partner. And I agree with that. But at the same time, how many of you are showing the competencies and the initiative to be a true business partner? You have to be truthful with yourself. You have to earn that respect if you have given them every reason not to consider you that role or that sophisticated. I also found an article from Inspirity, out of Kingwood, Texas, and I thought their list was good because it reiterated how about one of the biggest mistakes HR makes is your handbook policies aren't updated. And we talk about this all the time. You have to be looking at that at all times. I mean, throughout the year. Don't wait to the end of the year. If your supervisors, if your management team is not speaking that language, if they're not enforcing the policies, in the handbook. The handbook's not, it's almost a detriment. It can get you into trouble. How about ignorance of employment compliance? And again, that's what the whole basis for our show is, that we're trying to explain to many of you, you really need to stay on top of the changes. Be aware that there are state laws that may complement or may contradict federal laws. You have municipalities that are deciding what they can and cannot do. And if you're not staying on top of this, plausible deniability does not work. And we have said that over and over again. So I really appreciated that one on there. How about inadequate HR policies? We've already identified that the handbook has to be updated, but how many of you have HR practices where there just isn't a policy altogether? And there are times when I have to look at a client and say, well, historically, what have you been doing? Despite what you want to put in writing, what have you been doing and what's working and what's not working? Their next one is disregard for training. Okay, do I even need to go there? Yeah. Their next one is hasty hires and inaccurate job descriptions. There's a good one. When was the last time any of you went out and did a position profile? Now, I'm not saying you went out there and polished up the job description. I'm saying, how many of you have gone out and actually asked somebody, what do you do? I know what we thought we hired you for. I know what the job description on paper says, but tell me specifically, what do you do? Make sure that there's a reality check and that what you have in writing on a job description is truly what you're paying that person to do. How about incomplete employee files? And I love this one because every so often I'll say, well, let's look in their file and see what the last couple evaluations were. Or can you when we have a complaint of pay transparency, and someone says, well, I didn't get paid I'm not getting paid as much as they are, or it's been a while since you did an evaluation, and there's nothing in their file. Where do you think that puts the employee in regards to the control of that conversation? How about failing to document performance? I absolutely applaud that one. And we're talking about good and bad, remember. It's not just the negative that we want to document. It's performance overall. If you've got someone who needs some polish, or there's an opportunity for them to grow in their position, you should be documenting it. Otherwise, how do you think you're going to move closer to either promoting them or terminating them? So I thought those were wonderful lists, but I know you're all just dying to know what I think. Because I the crazy part is I feel like I've been telling you this for the last couple of years on this podcast. My number one is absolutely the lack of training. I cannot encourage all of you enough, even if it's just short little modules, or, the HR Academy has got a phenomenal program, which I've mentioned a couple times, called Training the Team. And these are great little modules, but, we've had people on the show that have training modules like Scott Warwick and others that it doesn't matter how you're doing it as long as you're doing it. And as long as you're holding your supervisors or your management team to that training. But please just do it. Number 2 is enabling. I think we make huge mistakes because as HR people, we are not holding people accountable, which is, it's my number 3. We aren't using consequences. Instead, we allow the supervisor to come and look at us and say, but I've told him 1,000,000 times, or I just don't understand why they're not listening. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be proactive, those are 2 things right there that will put you in a more proactive circumstance if you can train your individuals to stop enabling and start using consequences. And then number 4 for me is poorly written policies. or not following the ones you've got. I literally had someone, just say, well, I don't know. It just doesn't do any good. I don't want to be pinned down. I want to be able to use my discretion. Well, that's fine. But how consistent can you be? How can you treat similarly situated people and be very careful about not discriminating or showing bias if you don't have something structured, or what you do have in writing you're not following? The handbooks, SOP manuals, they're all living documents. Change them as the business needs. My number 5 is just the pure lack of documentation. I just cannot tell you. It just amazes me how companies and how management teams don't understand until it's too late that they should have been documenting. And then my last is waiting for something to happen. And I mean that. Please, please, please don't wait for something to happen. Carl Ulrich, who's been on the show a million times, we laugh because we've heard, we've talked to a number of clients and we've heard the phrase, well, it's not a problem until it's a problem. And the dilemma is when it becomes a problem, Carl and we have to react because we no longer can help them get out of it. We have to help them get through it. And I just beg all of you, please do not wait till something happens. Don't let that be your mistake. If anything, let your mistake be that you've got this sense of urgency and you're trying to help your teams be aware of the possibilities, the what ifs, be using the phrase what should happen, and help them understand that you really are there to be their partner. Because who better to have than somebody who's staying on top of these things, who understands the depth and the importance of human resources. I'm trying, guys. I'm trying, but I don't want any of you to make mistakes. But you know what? When we do, we learn from them, right? I know I do. Thanks for listening. And don't forget, keep sending in your ideas right here to the Human Resource.